Alrighty, welcome back. My name is Kirk Carver and I'm going to be walking you through how to write a weakness for a draft statement, interim visit, or a interim report. So let's start off. Where should you be looking? Well, go to your Team Chair workbook folder, and if you look at all the documents that are out there, and this is just a subset, the ones that will be helpful in writing and preparing that draft statement, you'll find that actually C200GI, C200I, and C311 are going to be the three documents that you're going to want to grab and download and put on a folder on the top of your desk. Make it something memorable so you don't forget. Also grab, of course, the Accreditation Policy and Procedure Manual, and grab the manual statement tool manual, which you get off of AMS. It's the editing tool for what to use within AMS itself. And when you get that, just as I talked about during the writing a concern video, you want to focus on C311 for your verb selection. It's absolutely critical so that you indicate that this is a weakness, not a concern, and not a deficiency, but a weakness. You have consistency on your verbs. And then you want to focus on C200GI, which is going to give you guidance on how to do this, and on the Accreditation Policy and Procedure Manual of exactly what a weakness is. And then I'll cover later in the video how not to fall into the multi-factor trap of despair, where you have a single criteria and multiple factors sort of contributing to that particular weakness. All right, so let's start off. What's the definition of a weakness? This is the definition of a weakness. You've got a lack of strength of compliance with the criteria. Okay, and so we're going to have to strengthen that criteria before you're in full compliance. And if you look back to 2022 and what the mix of deficiencies, weaknesses, and concerns, you'll see that actually in writing the draft statement, it's the dominant finding. And by the time we get to the final statement, it's not dominant, it comes in second place. It's giving concern a run for its money. So it's very, very common, and that's why this video is kind of important. You pay attention to it and learn how to write a weakness that shows a lack of strength of compliance. Now, just like any other finding, we're going to use the three-statement format. You want to state the criteria exactly. You want to spend some time on what did the team observe, and then you want to talk about the impact to the program and to the students. Okay, and again, be very, very careful. The C311 is got this table in it, and it really talks about here are some phrases or verbs that you can use to indicate you're talking about a weakness, and here are the ones for a concern and for a deficiency. And what you want to make sure is you have that verb consistency, that you're going to use verbs that convey to editor 1 and editor 2 and to the program and to the consistency committee that it's a weakness, that it's not a deficiency, it's not a concern, that there's a lack of strength issue here, not a potential, or it's not also does not satisfy. All right, so here's a good example for you. First and foremost, and I color-coded it for you. First and foremost, we're citing the criteria exactly. We're listing it out. We're not abbreviating. We're spending some time on what did the team observe, and you can see that here. And then we're also talking about the negative impact associated with this. And so, again, full statement of the criteria. It's defining in what the team observed. The program constituents were identified, but when you go and look at it, it's only partial, all right? And you've got some subset of constituents that are not participating. So with incomplete participation, you're only partially addressing, okay, the periodic review of the PEOs. And again, when you look at this, hopefully you're leaning back and going, that's consistent. The incomplete participation, partial address, that means weakness. You know, if I'm looking at this as an editor 1 or editor 2 or the program itself. Now here we have a bad example. This is a really bad example. First of all, the team chair didn't state the entire criteria, but it just put in ... where, we're summarizing. And every time you put in ... editor, 2 is twitching. So don't do that. Don't do that. In the second part, you're not giving enough information to draw a conclusion. So you're suggesting that it's partial representation, but you're not really coming out and stating that. And then you have really verb conclusion on the impact. When you see incomplete participation, that's a weakness, but we really don't know. When you say the criteria is being satisfied, that could be a concern or a weakness. When you say does not address, that's a deficiency. So again, each one of those, we've moved beyond twitching to epileptic spasms as the editor is jumping back and forth between this inconsistent verb usage. All right, so you saw a good example and a bad example. Let's now talk about the multi-factor pit of despair. And it is a pit of despair. Sometimes you're going to have a single criterion with multiple factors contributing to it. So it's different parts of the criteria that are being used. And there's a specific format for this in C200GI and C200I. Okay, so you want to use that specific format. And you want to be also careful that if multiple shortcomings are coming from the exact same part of the criteria, it's not multi-factor. You wouldn't split it out. So we're talking about an issue of formatting and content. If it is the same part of the criteria, multiple shortcomings, you're just writing it up as a single factor. If you have same criteria but different parts of the criteria that have weaknesses, you're going to use the format that's shown here. And I've listed it as C200, but it would really be C200GI or C200I that is contributing to it. So you're going to use that part on the bottom of the slide. And here's an example of where they got it wrong. You've actually got two parts of the criteria that are not being followed. And you can see the first part in yellow, the first factor being violated, the second factor being violated, and then a really nicely done impact statement. But again, the problem is it's not following the format that we want. And the format that we want looks like this. Okay? Notice we're going and splitting it out. We've got an A and B part. Okay? We've got the criteria listed. We've got the team observation listed. And then we've got the impact listed. Splitting that out. Okay? Now, the external appearance of your editor 1 is still going to be the same. We're still going to be looking like a grouchy old person. But on the inside, we're going to be jumping for joy because you got it right. Okay? And we didn't have to go through 38 exchanges of comments to get you to the right point of doing a multi-factor weakness. Here's another example as well. Gives you a different one. And again, the idea is to give you two different examples. Here the observations are a little bit shorter, but it's enough for the conclusion, and the impact is very, very clear as you're writing up that multi-factor finding. All right, so what are our key findings in this? First, always use, whether you're writing a concern, a deficiency, or weakness, always use the three-statement format. State the criteria exactly, state what the team observed with the appropriate detail to draw conclusions, and then state the impact on the program and its students. In the impact statement, be very, very careful of your verb choice. Again, go back to C311, look at that style guide, look at the table on verb choice. You don't have to use that, but what you don't want to use, what you don't want to do is get editor 1 and editor 2 confused over should this be a deficiency or a weakness or a concern, and that confusion starts on your verb choice, so be very, very careful. And then pay particular attention to the multi-factor pit of despair, and make sure that if it's the exact same part of the criteria with multiple findings, you just write it up as normal. If not, if it's different parts of the criteria and you have multiple factors contributing, you're writing it up in a different format, but still following the three-statement format for doing this. Well, very good. That brings me to the end of this video where we've been talking about writing a weakness in a draft statement, in an interim visit, or an interim report. I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we're going to talk about deficiencies.